if you're active, good things happen. I've just seen it over and over. I've lived it enough to know there is something there that's universal. It's not unique to just me. If we can figure out ways to give kids that opportunity, how do we expose as many kids as possible to that? We're often doing our kids a disservice when we're just one track. We're going to make you the most elite athlete in this one sport. The teammates and the coaches and the program and the workout schedule and the competition and the races, that combination of things, that's what I really then wanted to go replicate. Could I figure out some way to use technology to recreate that locker room-like experience that I was so fortunate to have?
This episode is brought to you by Kuul, the platform that's changing the game for how kids engage with movement and sport. What would help us even more is if you choose to subscribe. Now let's dive into the episode.
Sport doesn't just build strength, it creates belonging. It gives you a team, a rhythm, a reason to show up, and not just for yourself, but for the people beside you. And that's what today's guest understood early on, and it's what he set out to recreate, not in a locker room, but in a global platform. Today's guest is Mark Gainey, the co-founder and chairman of Strava, a global fitness community with over 100 million users in nearly every country. What began as a virtual locker room has become one of the most influential platforms in sport and wellness. But before Strava, Mark was an elite rower at Harvard, a teammate. And the early experience didn't just shape his mindset, it seeded the very DNA of what Strava would become. The intention, supporting people, not just in sport, but through movement, is not unlike what we're building at Kuul. And so, Mark, I've been really looking forward to this conversation. I know we've had some great conversation about movement and sport, and especially when it comes to community and behavior and building joy. So I am thrilled to dive in. Welcome to Kuul Conversations.
Hi, Claire. Yeah, thanks for having me. Excited.
Well, let's go way back. Before Strava, before the Harvard student athlete experience, and before the boardroom, let us know, what kind of mover were you as a kid before anyone told you what sport should look like?
Yeah, I consider myself fortunate. So I'm a bit of a dinosaur, born in the last century, grew up in the 70s and 80s as a kid. And in hindsight, so valuable because, we didn't have screens. We didn't have all these distractions. So I grew up in a little town in the Western United States, Reno, Nevada, known for its gambling, but more importantly, known for its location near Lake Tahoe and the Sierra Nevada mountains. And so as a kid, I was either running or biking on my little BMX bike, played a lot of soccer as a kid. That was, 2 seasons every year, skiing in the Sierras, swimming in Lake Tahoe, just constantly outdoors and very focused in a young age on team sports and moving. Soccer was big in my youth, that all the way up to high school. And then I became a runner in high school and really enjoyed cross country and things like that.
And so where then did the transition come with rowing? So it sounds like a broad multi-sport experience. How did that transition happen?
Yeah, so I had a really fortunate, one of the many places we were talking earlier before we went on camera here about luck. And one of the lucky moments for me was when I went to high school in Reno, I was part of an outstanding cross-country team, a running team. And for those 3 years that I was there on that team, we won the state championship. We competed. My toughest competitors were literally my teammates. They were the fastest kids around. And I was very fortunate. I won the state championship my senior year. And that unlocked an unusual opportunity. It unlocked an opportunity for me to attend Harvard. The cross-country track coaches from Harvard reached out and asked if I would have an interest in applying. And I remember my dad saying, I was a kid from Reno, like Harvard was not something you considered, but my dad was like, boy, they're going to send you a letter like that. You owe them, at least the courtesy of replying back and sending the application in. And so that's what happened. And so I was recruited to run. I got out to Harvard. Unfortunately, I was injured. I had some stress fractures and things that kept me from competing my freshman year. And a very long story short, in the process, again, going back to the 1980s, the crew coaches were pretty clever and they were pretty good at recruiting athletes from some of the other sports. And so I, through a random set of circumstances, got introduced to the head coach of the rowing program, a great guy named Charlie Butt. And I made the switch. I became a rower really starting my sophomore year. And my degree should say crew, Claire. I spent the majority of my time in that boathouse, just soaking it all in. I just had an amazing experience.
Why was that? Do you think that not coming from the rowing background, do you think that caused you and pushed you to immerse more into, we'll call it the rowing subculture perhaps? Do you think that was a reason why?
I think it's a good question. And I think that there is some truth to that. I think that, if I had to say one of the challenges I had as a runner was I'd achieved a lot of success, but as I mentioned, I'd also had some injuries along the way and so forth. And there probably was some legitimate burnout on my part, which I think a lot of young kids need to be careful with. I think particularly in this day and age, I was fortunate in that at least I was kind of switching sports. And I would run cross country in the fall and then I would become a skier, and I worked at a ski resort all winter. And then I go back to track in the summer. But nowadays, kids, like, it's 12 months out of the year and they're, supposedly competing at these high levels. I experienced some burnout as a runner, and to join Crew, it was sort of this wonderful marriage in that I was able to take a lot of what I had as a gift as an athlete, which is some big lungs and, sort of a love for suffering and kind of endurance sports. But now I could apply it to this new sport where a lot of technique was required. My learning curve was vertical. I was learning something new. And I think that's right. The combination of the two. I also just loved, people have always joked before, oh, is cross country really a team sport? It is. It takes 5 of you to cross that finish line and to win the team championship. Joining Crew was sort of that next evolution of a team, because literally, like, if you don't row in sync and really connect with your teammates in that boat, I don't care how strong the 9 people are in the boat, you won't move fast. And so that opportunity to really think about teamwork in a new and unique way was also a powerful draw.
Yeah, that's really incredible. And a few stories I would say that we have where you had a multi-sport background and you've really showed how you transferred into rowing, and perhaps the mindset to even do that, to embrace it and to say that I can do it. And then speaking to maybe what might be traditionally viewed as an individual sport, but actually showing the elements of team and how so many transferable skills across into sports. It's something to bear in mind, I think, for kids and parents to remember what's possible.
I've talked to a lot of particularly sort of college, even professional coaches over the years, and they are the first to acknowledge that if they can get a young person who has come from a sort of multi-sport background and has just kind of taken failure and success, but learns how to move in different ways, in some ways a much better proposition than to help them sort of excel later in their athletic career than early. I think I have to be careful. I have strong opinions around this, but I think we're often doing our kids a disservice when we're just like, one track, we're going to make you the most elite athlete in this one sport when you're age 10 through 18 in the hopes that you maybe get a college scholarship or something. It's here in the US, we've got a conundrum. And so I'm a big advocate for let the kids play, let them do different things. And you're right. I believe that because it's exactly what I experienced.
Yes, very much so. And it sounds like that rowing experience at Harvard, like that team aspect, the shared community and rhythm of that, it was more than just the competition. That's what kind of kept you within the team experience.
Oh, 100%. In many ways, as you mentioned earlier, this is why Strava exists, because while I was at Harvard and on that team, really the draw was, it was my teammates. It was the daily conversation. It was the daily trash talking. It was the competition amongst teammates. It was the relationship I had with my coach, who became, my closest advisor. I have more lessons from Charlie than I got from any of my professors. The boatmen who maintained the boats became a good friend. The fans on the sidelines that, keep you moving through a race, the annual competition. Rowing's a wonderful sport because if you win, you get to pull up next to your competitor and you take their shirt off their back. You physically get to take their shirt away from them. Just all these little pieces that added up to this experience that kept me motivated and frankly kept me on track. My parents would be the first to tell you that, my grades were at their best when I was in the thick of racing season, which really made no sense because in some respects, I should have been distracted by everything going on with Crew. But really what we learned was when that was working well, I was better with time management. I was better at being focused in the other areas that I needed to in order to keep rowing. So you're spot on. It was sort of all these, it's like a wonderful recipe with all these different ingredients that came together to create this experience that I was so fortunate to have. And then when I graduated, wanted to quickly recreate it.
And I'd love to dive into that. So from your experience, when you leave college, before you found Strava, what did you feel you were missing? Because collegiate sport is like elite sport. What did you feel like you were missing from that? And maybe it's the emotional part, but what was it about the environment that stuck with you so deeply that led you to recreating it digitally?
Yeah, so a little bit of context. So unfortunately, so first off, I was so enamored with the sport that when I was graduating from college, my original plan was to keep rowing and see just how far I could take it. Could I make a national team? Could I make an Olympic team? And those dreams were crushed very quickly because while I was training on an erg, on a rowing machine, I ruptured a disc in my lower back and, kind of it had to reset my expectations. And so I ended up back on the West Coast. Frankly, we're rowing at the time. It wasn't as popular. You could find good programs, but not where I happen to be in the Bay Area where I started work. First thing I had to do was just shift. Okay, I'm not going to be rowing anymore. What can I be doing? And I went back to running and was enjoying that. I was, there's the local run club and there's some local races and things. And I also was entering the workforce where you're learning how to be in a work environment and fellow workers. And I'll never forget, even one of my people that I went to work for, one of his sales pitches to me was, just like you enjoyed being a varsity athlete in college and the competition, we've got a lot of that same energy and competitive fervor here at our firm. And you'll get that. And I understood what he was saying, but no, it was not a good replacement for what I was experiencing on the crew team. So great workplace, no regrets. It was a wonderful first job. I learned a lot. It's really what sort of inspired me to become an entrepreneur. But to answer your question, what was missing was a lot of that camaraderie, a lot of even sort of the motivation to work out. Again, as an adult where we've got, work obligations and oftentimes family obligations and other things, sometimes it's just hard to find the time to work out. What I recognized was that if I'm working out, I'm generally a better person. I'm a better coworker. I'm a better partner. I could be a better parent today. But man, is it hard to stay active. And so what I remembered about crew was having all those things we talked about a second ago, the teammates and the coaches and the program and the workout schedule and the competition and the races, that combination of things was what kept me active, kept me motivated. And that's what I really then wanted to go replicate. As early as 1995, we had a business plan. Now, Strava was not founded in 1995. It took us another 15 years really to get it off the ground. But the business plan and the idea was planted very early, which was, boy, could I figure out some way to use technology to recreate that locker room-like experience that I was so fortunate to have.
Wow, that's so incredible. That was around the time of the internet starting, I would imagine. Yeah, wow, that's incredible. And I can totally relate to, I can feel the energy of that locker room and being in the collegiate sports arena. Even when you walk into the gym or the practice, it's the other sports codes, it's the other athletes, it's the banter between different communities almost of student athletes. And that is something so special and rare. And it's making me kind of dive a little bit to the left on a thought that what if you're a kid or a young person who maybe isn't in sport or not sporty? You miss out on that type of community and camaraderie. Have you ever thought about that? And maybe even, as you said, how it relates to academia or later on in life, it brings so many benefits otherwise, but just that idea of that community.
Yeah, we talk about it all the time in my house. As you know, my wife, she's got the tough job. I mean, she founded a nonprofit that's very focused on exactly what you're saying, which is, not unlike the work that you do. There are many kids in the world who forget trying to be involved in a sport, don't even get the opportunity to just play, to just be active, to be in safe environments where they can run and hop and skip and jump and mess around with their friends and just feel sort of that importance. And I think if you don't have that, it's then very hard to take that next step and maybe do something a bit more organized. Anything that I can do to try to compel someone to realize two things. One is, again, if you're active, good things happen. It's just a very simple premise, but I've just seen it over and over. When I am active now as an adult, honestly, even if it's just a 30-minute walk around the block, 20-minute walk around the block, it's not the physical things that are happening to me. It's the mental things. My head clears. I'm more apt to think clearly. Some of my best ideas happen when I'm out on just an easy jog or something like that. So I've lived it enough to know there is something there that's universal. It's not unique to just me. And so if we can figure out ways to give kids that opportunity, but it doesn't have to be winning a gold medal. It can be as simple as, frankly, how do we get them outside again? And how do we get them in safe and comfortable places where they can, to use a visual, they can move, they can spin, they can play. And if that happens, I think that there's a natural progression. I think that there's an opportunity for them to then explore what is it to be part of a team or to have a shared goal with someone. That was what was so powerful about the crew team, was that concept of working on something, not just for yourself, but together as a unit, as a team. And That's what translates when you get to adult life. Nothing happens on your own. Like, you have to have amazing teammates to accomplish things in life. And I'm a huge advocate of, okay, how do we expose as many kids as possible to that?
I couldn't agree more about that. It's the team element. And as you said, to accomplish great things. It's one thing actually that I felt really strongly about when we built Kuul Play for the 60% of kids that don't play sport. And it was one of the things that I felt really passionate about that kind of engagement piece and the community, that they're working together, moving and playing to achieve something together. And rather than the zero-sum game of we need to beat you, you can change and recreate it. That's more child-centered, let's say. And so that engagement piece we do is, I guess, more in a hybrid way for these digital natives. So we call it hybrid play, turning the screen of Kuul Play's digital world and then taking them off the screen like a portal, like you're saying, and inviting them into real world play, and then looping them back into that kind of community piece.
Yeah, I mean, it's so important, and you're spot on. And I think that you're bringing up another important point that we've acknowledged at Strava over the years, which is that it's not a matter of sort of dismissing technology and saying, well, that's because, again, I can joke about the fact that I grew up without screens and how lucky was I and so forth.
Right.
But that's just not the reality anymore. And frankly, it's not a matter of just taking screens can be of value. Like, there's no question. How do we take advantage of their best parts to enable that play, to enable sort of people to be active in our world? We've put a lot of time and thought into that sort of at Strava. We don't want our members sort of sitting staring at their phones. We want that phone to be a partner in their lifelong journey to be active. And yeah, the more we can be doing that at a younger age, I think the better off we are at creating really good, healthy habits.
That is absolutely one of the things I love about Strava. It doesn't interrupt movement. If I'm running or even if you're cycling, it actually meets you after. It's like a great coach or teammate. And that feels really rare in tech solutions, Mark.
Yeah. I wish that I could tell you we had this all planned out and this is exactly, I think we've learned, frankly, good ways and bad ways along the way. We've made tons of mistakes, but one, we're very fortunate that our business model itself, literally the way that Strava generates revenue, is conducive to then having a healthy relationship with the phone. Because we're a subscription-based business, we're not in the business of selling time on the screen. We don't have to worry about getting somebody in front of an ad. And I think that's, I'm not in any way dismissing the other business models. It's just different. And by being different, we can then focus less on screen time and more on just quality of the relationship. Can we provide something of high value, whether it's before you go out and work out, while you're working out, or after you work out, in such a way that you see enough value that you'll pay for it? And Strava is great because it's a freemium business, so you can use a ton of features for free. But if you want to upgrade, then there's that opportunity to do that. And so literally it starts with our business model and allows us to do that. But then I think it's also just acknowledging that you have to play the long game with your members. And I think this can be true for kids as well. It's kind of a little bit what we're talking about. We can't get them to jump into organized sport if, frankly, they're not yet comfortable in their bodies, or there's other challenges. Again, we talk a lot about even just, are they in a safe environment? Can they go to the playground and so forth? So until we can kind of get there, there's a progression. And it's the same thing on Strava. It's like, you can use it for free. There's lots of features because we want to connect you with like-minded people. We also find that when you have teammates, when you have people you can follow on Strava, the data shows us you'll stay more active. You'll be more consistent. You'll be inspired maybe to go out even though it's raining and do a 30-minute jog because your friend did it an hour ago. That's the kind of way in which we're hoping that technology plays a valuable role in the process.
That's such a valuable point. It's that tech doesn't need to compete with it, to use a sporting term. It doesn't need to compete. It can add value. And in the world that we're living in, it's integrating that in a sustainable way. And I think one of the advantages of that is that it allows, in Strava's case, it's really powerful because it allows people to share their movement story and have that kind of online digital footprint of that story. And I had a question for you around this is probably coming from the performance athlete time when I was post running competitively and just my teammates. Do you feel like that it ever risks being performative, movement for validation rather than the joy piece that we're trying to, how do you navigate that trade-off?
No, you go back in history a little bit. I mean, one of the things particularly the early days of Strava, there was trying to strike a really interesting balance because we did want Strava to meet the needs of some of the most demanding athletes in the world. So
Right.
our thesis was, if we're not good enough for them, how can we be good for anybody in the world? So we aspired to build a product and a service where if you were highly performative, if performance mattered and data mattered and the metrics, you were focused on those because you were trying to win races or, accomplish, big goals, Strava could be your partner. At the same time, we wanted Strava to be inviting. We didn't want Strava to come across as elitist or, only for the best, most aggressive athletes on the planet. And we had to figure out how to grow into that. It took time. So I'll give you a perfect example, particularly as we started to bring runners onto the platform, because we started in cycling and then we migrated and began to add other sports, and running was our second sport. And as we brought running on, we had to recognize that there would be elements of what someone might want to or not want to share with their friends. Perfect example being something like pace. So if you go out and you run, we didn't want people only posting their best workouts. We wanted them to be able to post all of their workouts, because when they do that and their friends see it, that's what keeps them motivated and vice versa. And so it took us a long time, but we finally figured out, hey, we should allow them to choose whether they want to share their pace or not. Just toggle, and you could hide it. And we figured out there's a lot of things you could decide to share or not share. So once we gave our members the flexibility to tell their own story, that enabled a different kind of behavior on the system. It wasn't just about, to your point, posting my best performances. It was, hey, I can post every day and I can decide what to share. I'll give you one other example. When we added the ability to add photos to a workout, it became less about your performance and the map and the speed and the distance that you went. And it became much more this amazing sunrise that I caught while I was out on my morning run. Or look at the mud that we got when we were riding our mountain bike, right after a rainstorm. And so we were able to slowly sort of change the narrative and the kind of the value behind, again, sharing an activity or memorializing an activity. And it wasn't always about performance, but you're right. We had to learn the hard way. We had to see it. And frankly, we were accused early on of, yeah, Strava's good, but I'm not good enough to be on it. Like, that's crazy. Anybody looked at my times? Like, they're really slow. So, yeah.
Mark, this is one of the big reasons I wanted to talk to you, because what I think can be often missed in that exact example is that you've uncovered, we'll say, the elite end of sport where it's super competitive. You unlocked a way for it to be accessible to the recreational athlete who doesn't need to be about the best performance. And if we draw a parallel to youth sports, which in the US model tends to be, and frankly quite globally as well, it tends to emphasize a lot more on the adult competitive model, where it is about the best performance, the next travel league, the next championship. And so I think it's, just super important maybe that there's lessons in how we're able to create the experience for the user. It's something we think deeply about Kuul Play and engaging the kids. It's like, let's not recreate what works in one subgroup population elite sport, which is great and we all enjoy watching that, but it's not for everyone. And I feel like Strava's done that so well in the adult space.
Yeah, Claire, you're right, you're pushing another hot button that I have around sort of that. Like, it's almost like just the ebb and flow of anybody's journey when it comes to their athletic life, to their active lifestyle. And I'll preface, the first thing I'll say is, like, I think at times we've also it's important when we talk about being active and particularly participating in sports to acknowledge that competition is part of it. Like, I'll be the first to admit that there's also been this weird trend here oftentimes around the participation, or like it's just about the participation. It's almost like, don't talk about the competition. It's like, it's part of the journey. Like, you have to learn what it is to compete and to succeed and fail. And I mean, I've got all kinds of stories of, yes, I've got the few races where I won or I did exceptionally well, but I've got many more where the race did not go as planned, where I fell apart, you name it. So on the one hand, I don't want to dismiss that. I really think, at least when it comes to sports participation, yeah, there's winning and losing and so forth, but you're on this journey and you can't get there until you just sort of enjoy sort of the two pieces. One is literally the physical movement aspect of it. And the second piece of it is doing it with other people. And so that, to me, and even in my adult life, I find myself ebbing and flowing through. There are times when I'll kind of set a particular goal and I might work towards something. And what I've really come to appreciate it, and now 57 years old, is it turns out it's not the end goal that is the best part. It's the journey along the way. I am working towards something that involves oftentimes self-competition, right? The concept of, can I go accomplish something maybe that I haven't before? I may or may not get there, But it turns out that the journey of getting there is really fun. And so I think trying to embrace this with kids, where on the one hand, it's like competition is a part of life. Like it's going to keep happening no matter what, whether you're in school and it's grades, whether you're in work and getting jobs and promotions and so forth. But if you just focus on whether I win or lose, that never pays off. But if I can focus on sort of what can I do each day that's working towards goals, boy, to quote Kobe Bryant, right? The famous basketball player from the Lakers, he always argued, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't remember it exactly, but failure was never in his vernacular. He's like, failure only happens if you quit. But if you just keep sort of being willing to persist and learn and acknowledge sort of where those weaknesses are and how to keep moving forward, good things ultimately happen. Yeah. My soapbox around like competition doesn't have to be bad, but competition more often than not is just with the individual and that sense of, can I take some risk in my own life and go? And so if I'm a kid, it's like, I just want them to like nothing. What's the worst thing that can happen if you get out there and learn how to skip rope? Okay. You're not going to be very good at it. Guess what? No, neither was anybody else when they started trying to skip rope. But if you're willing to persist, you can be really good at it.
That is so powerful. And it sounds like that translated in your journey as an entrepreneur. I mean, that's a very tough journey as well. And that idea of failure. And did your time as an athlete shape the way then you looked at failure and how you perceived that way, later in life?
100%. This is again where I consider myself so lucky to have had that upbringing where I kept getting exposed to sport. Sport was just this incredible metaphor for what life is like, which is ups and downs and peaks and valleys, to use every sort of euphemism. But it really is such a great platform from which at an early age, I kind of saw, and I just saw that if I was willing to keep working hard, turns out that there will be moments of peaks. There will be moments of, I'll give you, a funny anecdote just because I think it's relevant. When I go back and I think about my rowing experience, yes, there were victories and defeats, but if there was one moment when I was on the water that sticks out so clearly in my mind, we weren't competing. It was during a practice. And it was during a practice when we were doing a long piece down the river. And our coach was asking us to we were very focused on rhythm, trying to work as one unit and be a team. And when a boat's going well, you get something called swing, where the boat it comes in the water and out of the water. It literally lifts when all the oars are in the water. And then as we're recovering and the oars are out of the water, the boat kind of sinks. And it's like a drug. To get a boat to swing is this very powerful feeling that, again, you can't describe it for what it is. When you're not in swing and the road is off, it's a horrible feeling. Like the boat rocks and it feels jerky. And that's what we were doing. Even though we were supposed to just be at a nice, calm, kind of easy pace and swing, we were messed up. And our coach stopped us and he asked us something interesting. We were all wearing heart rate monitors back then. And he asked us each to call out what our heart rate was. And one of our teammates had an exceptionally high heart rate. What was clear was that he was actually working really hard. Like he was pulling harder than everybody else. And so the coach said, hey, can you just take it down a few beats and just relax like the rest of the guys that are in the boat. And as soon as he did that, our boat fell into swing. It started moving faster. And so I tell that long story because one, it wasn't in the middle of a competition. It wasn't about winning that day, but it was such a powerful lesson because it was sort of recognizing what was required to work as one unit. And we accomplished more speed and rhythm in that day than we had, frankly, most of the early part of the season. And that's what I want everybody to be able to experience. It's that it's often not about going out there and just working harder than everybody else. It's figuring out that magic chemistry when you get to do something with other people and have fun along the way. And for me, like that feeling that we got in the second half of that workout, I'll never forget it. It's burned in my memory more so than any of my races.
That is magic, pure magic. That feeling of inflow that you're describing is just in magic and in sync with others, that's absolute. And it's a word you keep coming back to is that rhythm, that rhythmic piece. And there's rhythm to movement, isn't there? There's almost like a play soundtrack to it. It's one of the beautiful things that I think that we forget and the importance of getting kids moving and getting in touch with their bodies, because you've just described that, the feeling of that's like elevated when a number of people can in sync do that. It's really remarkable. really remarkable. When you think about Strava and all the people that Strava has helped, and particularly I'm thinking about even the ones who are, say, thinking, I'm not an athlete, to actually helping them believe that they are, because they can come on the platform. It's not about those performances that you've taught. Frankly, I mean, you've helped millions of adults rediscover movement. I'd love to know what you've learned about that motivation piece. You've spoken to your motivation, the motivation for these people, once Strava grew beyond the hardcore athlete, what was that like?
Yeah, I mean, this is where Michael and I, my co-founder, probably never, I think we would both be honest and say we never imagined that Strava would be what it's become, and we take pride in it, and we hope we just keep going. 150 million people who are supporting one another and being active. I think we've learned a few things along the way. I've alluded to a few of them, which is that once you sort of acknowledge that there's lots of really powerful elements of just doing a simple workout, capturing that moment that you can share with others turns out to be a really important motivational tool. But it's often not the performance itself. It's not the speed. It's the route that you take. Who would have known that the importance of the map on Strava would be so incredible going forward? We've always kind of had it there, but I think there's two things to come. One is when somebody posts a workout on Strava and I get to see where they've gone, it's a discovery opportunity. And today we actually have so much data inside Strava that before you go work out, you can open up the app and you can literally ask it, hey, I want to do a 3-mile run from where I'm located right now. When I travel, I use this with Strava a lot. I need a 3-mile run, and it will auto-populate. It will tell me sort of the various places that I can go that other people have used, because we're using all of the Strava prior workouts to give people the best sense of, what's the best route, most appropriate route. So simple things like that ability to share and be able to discover that. We talked about the photos and the importance of telling. It's a storytelling platform, but it's a story that's vertical. It's the story of your active life. Strava does little things like if somebody hasn't been posting to Strava in a while and then does, let's say, for instance, Claire, you and I follow each other on Strava. It's been a while since you post, and then you do, I will get a notification that says, hey, Claire is back. She had a chance to work out. Give her a kudo. So a kudo on Strava is the equivalent of like a virtual high five. It's just like, hey, nice job. And we know that when people start to receive kudos, like that is motivation. Like, oh, that feels kind of good. I think I'm going to go work out again. We're learning this through social media. We understand the importance of likes and so forth. We're just trying to figure out a way to use it in a healthy way. And so, allowing the storytelling platform, allowing this ability for people to discover opportunities that maybe they didn't know exist, and then figure out easy ways for you to interact with each other so that you can kind of give that high five. These are the pieces that, again, very simple thesis. When you're active, good things happen. It's hard to be active. So let's bring teammates around you. Let's bring people that you connect with. It doesn't require hundreds of followers. You follow a few of your friends on Strava. That's what you need. And if you have a few friends that are on Strava that you follow, that's the motivation that you need. And we've learned that once you do that, get out of the way and let people go have fun.
That's really cool. Like the data piece, the dopamine piece. And you know what I'm thinking of? Kids, youth sports again. I often say they drop out because of, dropping out of joy in some ways. And maybe the same is true for adults, but just in a different language. Like for fun, like how do you think fun is an underestimated driver of this too in adult movement?
Yeah, you're spot on. One of the things, again, just giving a little bit of historical context at Strava, when we upload somebody's ride, we're taking it from whether it's a smartphone, whether it's a Garmin device that someone wears or has on their bicycle. So there's a lot of data that comes in. And it would have been real easy for us to go very deep in the analytics side of the business and give people all kinds of performance metrics and so forth, and deep dives into sort of their historical trends. And there's elements of that are in Strava. If you want to deep dive, you can. But the fundamental thesis that Michael and I started with, I think today would still be sort of at the core, is that if it's not fun and entertaining, people will lose interest. And so what are the elements that are fun and entertaining? Now, I think this is true of kids just like it is adults. Amongst adults, there's lots of different personas. So we've learned at Strava that we're serving a very diverse community. There are people who, kind of to your point, they love competing. And they do want to look at their performance metrics, and they do want to understand that they're improving, and they do want to, see that it's kind of going up and to the right. And so we give them some element of that. And if they need more, we're happy to push them to other partners and so forth. But there's other personas on Strava that don't spend any time looking at any of the performance metrics, but they are connected to a few people and they stay motivated because they have their tribe, they have their small posse, they have their group of friends that maybe don't even live in the same state or the same country, but by sharing kind of their workouts, it's a way for them to stay connected on that same thing. We often find, as you mentioned, sort of your prior careers as a runner and university and so forth, oftentimes teammates who were on a team together, but now they're off and living in different parts of the world. This is a great way to stay motivated because they can just simply support each other. And
I'm definitely one of those, Mark. I'm one of those Strava users.
Yeah, I have two very different kinds of friends on Strava. I have those who are right here with me locally and we're on the same trails and so forth. But then, frankly, I probably kudo just as many friends who are in other parts of the world. My son, who lives in London today, I'll wake up in the morning and say, what was his workout? No, congrats. And, usually we're trading comments about what he was doing. That's become much more important, I think, within the Strava vernacular is sort of thinking about the social connection, thinking about the way in which sport is that universal language, can keep people not just active, but keep people connected to one another and with that shared interest.
You've given adults like a second chance to move. Even for myself, in terms of loving movement again, in a different context and way. And in some ways for kids, we're trying to help them, kids who've never even got a first chance, they've never got to love movement before. And I'm curious, if you were designing for them, what would you build for that 60% of kids maybe who never got to the sports stage yet, like you talked about, and we need this piece before? What would you build for them?
So I'll preface my statements by saying that we had a choice around at Strava. We recognize there's a huge portion of the adult population out there that doesn't work out, that doesn't go. And it's often referred to as the couch to 5K crowd. Like someone who's currently on the couch, how do you get into 5K? So full disclosure, Claire, we decided early on, we probably won't be successful there. Okay. And it's more important that we support those people who've already decided, I want to be active. I enjoy being active. I enjoy participating in sport, or I enjoy going in and running or walking. Or whatever. And so how do we support them? And the thesis was twofold. One is it's just a lot easier to support an existing behavior than it is to try to change a behavior. The second was, our thesis was, if we can support them, they're probably our greatest advocates at bringing someone who's on the couch off. Like, we're not going to do it, but if their friends are doing things, maybe they can do it. I preface that by saying, I'm not sure I've got answers for the 60% of the kids who aren't doing anything, other than, as I've learned from my wife, Ashley, I do think there's just some basic things that we need to be doing as adults to help these kids, because it's not like they don't want to do it. They're too young to even know whether they should want. But I think we've created all these barriers. I think we need to address safety. When I was a kid, I could ride all over my town. I could go out. My parents would just say, be back for dinner, and that was it. The world has changed. It's just not the same. So how do we create environments, physical environments, where kids can play and not worry about their safety? I think that there's a motivation. I do think that we've created this world where if you're not good at something from day one, somehow you don't do it. And it goes back to our failure discussion. And so how do we sort of teach these kids that we all started as novices? I mean, I was, and still probably am, not very good rower. I mean, it's like, I think if you were to ask my coach, as long as the water was flat and I could pull really hard, I was fine. But any kind of weather conditions out there and like, we're in trouble as a boat because, Mark's going to fully acknowledge it. I was a rookie, novice, learning. I'm doing it right now. Claire, I'll give you an example. Like, I'm 57. I've always enjoyed trying to get out and surf, but I am a horrible surfer. I'm not a surfer. I'm someone who has a surfboard and tries to go do it. And I've just committed, okay, I'm going to go and start getting out in the water a couple times a week. And I'm going to be a total noob out there. And as long as I don't offend the really good surfers and stay out of their way, I want to go learn it. So how can we inspire kids to recognize, like, yeah, you don't have to be good at something. It's okay. And that concept of there is no such thing as failure. Let's go. So, sorry, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but I think that the tools, I'd want to share my own stories with them so they recognize anybody can do it. There's nothing special about my background other than, thankfully, my parents were able to expose me to being active. So how can I help kids just get exposure? How can I help kids recognize they don't have to be good at something when they start? And then the third thing, I do have a lot of proof points that show me that if you're active as a fifth grader in a school, like, it can lead to really great things down the road. And that's hard for kids. It's hard for adults to, you were asking me earlier, like, has your adult life has it been what you, I'm not sure I ever looked more than 5 years ahead at any one time, but I do know there's been a common thread because I've remained active throughout my life from a young age to now. I can always go back and trace that the good things that have happened in my life somehow were part of that journey. Kids have to know that. They have to hear that. And then they have to be encouraged that it's okay to kind of just muddle their way through different things until they find something that they enjoy.
I think that's a critical point, to find something you enjoy, not to give up at, if it's not football or one of the more traditional sports, there's lots of options out there. And I do hear from a lot of parents that it is challenging when there's a lot of pressure if you go into a sport often to make teams, and, the system can be designed. And maybe you experience this as a parent with your own kids, that the system can set up to be, you need to get to high school or to get on a team, you need to be really good. And the amount of kids that get cut. Do you have any advice for parents or thoughts on that for parents? Or maybe how you would maybe design a system differently?
Yeah. So there's two things that I would say. One is, I'm just thinking about my own boys' experience. For better or worse, they were products of their dad and their mom. And so what did that mean? It's like, they're going to go do what I do. And so they were biking and running and skiing and being active outdoors. And, they did some soccer early on, but it wasn't something that they gravitated towards. And so we didn't pursue it. And frankly, I didn't put them on the basketball teams because that was in the middle of ski season and I wanted them skiing with me. So my point being, like, you have to walk the talk. So parents out there, it starts with you. Like, are you active? What are you doing? And if you're living an active life in some shape or form, that's a great signal to your kids that they can do the same. So I do fear I see a lot of parents on the sidelines these days where, like, they have very high expectations for their kids out on the field. And I look at them and I'm like, what's giving you the right to be yelling at your kid that way when, frankly, they would outrun, outpace, outdribble you right now? So I've got this thing. It's like, I think the parents need to live the life that they expect of their kids a little bit and recognize that. The second thing, and I just speak for the United States, it drives me nuts here. When I go on to any media around sports, here in the US, you'd think that there's basically 3 sports that exist: American football, basketball, baseball, hockey, a few of the big 3 or 4, and there's nothing else. When there are amazing things that people can go and do, and that just a little bit of research. I've got a great friend who got a college scholarship as a fencer, learned how to fence when he was basically in high school, and then did exceptionally well and ended up going to Stanford as a fencer. Running, for me, that's what my boys ended up pursuing, running, and really enjoyed that through high school and did that. But you and I could make a list right now of probably 30 different sports that get no attention, but so much fun. And that, to me, we've lost something along the way where we get inundated by the 3 or 4 things that somehow everybody has to do, when in fact there's just a million ways to be active, to play. And I keep sort of taking it to the sports side of things, but only because I just think that if the kids are allowed to sort of play and so forth and begin to sort of organize. Why did I enjoy soccer? We were playing it on the playground at school. That was the thing and I found sort of that I was just drawn to it. I would really encourage parents to think outside the box and keep exposing their kids to lots of different. Last thing, my boys ended up doing Taekwondo. Pretty young age, really enjoyed sort of the discipline around it. I had a wonderful coach at the time. And by the time they were entering high school, they were earning their black belts in Taekwondo. Is it something that they do today as young adults? No. I don't think that neither of them would acknowledge being a black belt in a back alley somewhere. They're probably not going to do that. But I guarantee you that they would talk about the lessons that they learned throughout that journey and achieving those belts and, this little subset community that they had, that it turned out to be great for them. Who knew? I was not Taekwondo. So that's a good example. I lived an active life, but not that one. So they don't have to be the same. My kids don't have to do the same thing. They don't have to do the same thing as you, but I do think you have to be a great model. And I think we have to expose them to lots of different things and get them to see that the world is full of ways to, again, be active and participate in sport.
I love that you brought that up. And it's something we've tried to do here in Kuul Conversations. One of our more recent guests was from Team USA bobsled. She was a junior bobsled and skeleton athlete. And it's like that. There's so many options actually in your neck of the woods from Sacramento. So you would never think, on Team USA from Sacramento, you'd have in a non-snow area. So it just goes to show what's possible. And there's so many options. And I think that's such a valid point for parents is role modeling, even being active, doing a neighborhood walk, each thing makes a difference, because it helps with kids' behaviors and it gives them opportunities. Mark, I feel like we can't wrap up without talking about maybe moments that Strava, maybe it's a user, a message that completely stopped you in your tracks. I'm sure over the years you've incredible stories of how it's influenced people's lives like that. And I understand it's more on the adult side. And it's not because they ran faster, as we talked about, in just the performance ends, but because Strava changed their lives in some ways.
Yeah, this has been one of the many sort of unexpected pleasures of Strava. And I could spend the next hour kind of walking through stories of, the classic ones of people who found Strava and were able to lose vast amounts of weight and just live healthier lives. Individuals who've been rescued because they use a particular feature called Beacon where, they've fallen while they were biking and they were out in the woods. And thankfully, Beacon knew exactly where they were. And so their loved one was able to track them down with the paramedics. I often tell the story of the gentleman who's kind of your classic Strava user. This is a gentleman in Texas, about my age, maybe a little bit younger, who was an avid cyclist, avid mountain biker, and was out there always kind of competing with his friends and enjoying it. But there was one piece of data in Strava that always annoyed him, which was just that his heart rate was always kind of 20 beats higher than his peers, than his friends. And he was like, I'm clearly faster than anyone. Why doesn't do this? Well, that led him to go just visit a cardiologist, a doctor, to just check on some things. He, again, felt great. It turned out that he had what was called a widowmaker. He had basically something that while he was asymptomatic and wasn't feeling anything, he was at high risk of having a massive coronary attack, a massive heart attack. And so they went in and did the necessary procedure and he's fine. And he wrote a long message to us just saying, look, Strava was sending this very sort of subtle signal. I didn't feel anything, but by listening to that signal and going, and you and I have talked before, whether it's at the individual level and kind of getting that inspiration for us to keep doing what we're doing. Today, I can just finish with the other thing that I think most people don't fully appreciate with Strava. Why is it so important for you to upload? If you want another piece of motivation, by contributing your activities to Strava, we take that information, we aggregate it in sort of looking at the broader picture. It's all anonymized. We're not tracking where people are. We're just simply taking what we call the heat, the physical movement. We're looking at it, and we're allowing experts in the world in other fields, experts in the field of transportation, firefighting, climate change, and so forth. They're looking at people's movement data and being able to reshape the way in which, frankly, we make decisions in the world today, whether that's how we navigate and make safer roads for people so that we can share the roads with cars, whether it's when it comes to firefighting, wildfires, and how people move through natural forests. That's been the really fun aspect of Strava. So I will continue to champion, don't be afraid to upload. It's free. I guarantee you'll have fun along the way, and you'll be surprised by, like you said, some of these sort of unintended consequences that are really good.
It's the gift that keeps on giving, You're improving your own life, but you're also improving others as well, It's incredible. Would you be game for a rapid fire round, just one or two thoughts that come to mind, short statements on a couple of questions or thoughts? Okay. What's one word your teammates would have described you back then as a Harvard rower?
One word. Oh, yes. Boy, I'm sorry, Claire. Now you rapid fire. What would be I'll call it the ox. I could pull like an ox.
I love it. Are you familiar with the Irish rowers? They say pull like a dog. They were the Olympians. Yeah. So just reminded.
That would be it. Like a dog. I couldn't row in the water to save my life, but I could pull on that erg as well as anybody.
There we go. Strava in one word.
Oh, I'm going to just use fun. Fun. And fun leads to, when something's fun, if we can keep life fun, but it's a short word that works real well. Then comes inspiration and yeah. But that's, for me, if we can keep Strava fun and people say it's fun to be on Strava, it's fun to be a member of Strava, then I think we've a lot of life ahead of us.
That's cool. That's really cool. It's actually our keyword for our Kuul play. So movement is about more than just data. It's about, as you like,
being a better person. Period. Yeah. If I move, there's not a single part of my life that isn't more effective.
Love that. What's one belief you hold about sport or movement that most people would disagree with?
I'll go so far as to say it is the anchor by which almost any other success can be guaranteed. I am steadfast in belief that anybody who commits to being active will see levels of success that are actually much harder to achieve when you're not.
Love that. Favorite movement you've had moving in the last year?
Oh, yeah. Well, you're just catching me before the year is up. Last May, early May, I had the good fortune to go to the Grand Canyon with 3 close friends and run what's called the rim to rim to rim. So we start on the South Rim. We run basically 5,000 plus feet down to the Colorado River. We go up the North Rim, and then we turn around and we go back. And that was about 45 miles over the day. Life-changing. Everybody in the world should go to the Grand Canyon once, whether you hike it, whether you run it like I did, doesn't matter. It was absolutely one of the best days of my life.
That's incredible. It's now top of my bucket list to do.
Oh,
And I'll try and do a bit, run it.
Claire, you have to do it. It's a very, very special place. It's mystical in its power, and it was a really fun day. For me, part of why I did it wasn't a marathon where I'm trying to hit a certain time. It wasn't about the performance element of it. It was a day to enjoy the company of these 3 friends. We had all spent a lot of time training for it and preparing so that we could go the 45-mile distance and all the elevation gain and so forth. So we put forth the effort, and then it was a day to celebrate. And sure, things didn't go well all the time. It's also a metaphor for life in general, because in my case, basically 42 of the 45 miles were great. And then the last 3 miles, like I blew a gasket. Like I had a really hard time making the last, but it wouldn't have been a full experience if I hadn't had the good, the bad, and everything in between. But it really was the perfect example of teammates enjoying the moment, having done the hard work to be there, not worrying about the performance of the day. All we wanted to do was accomplish it. Just start and finish. And everything else in between was just gravy. It was enjoying the views. It was enjoying the other people on the trails. It was embracing the heat. At one point we were in what they call the box, and, it's like 90 plus degrees and you're like, oh man, it's hot down here. But that's, everybody just put it on the list. And there's lots of ways to go and appreciate the Grand Canyon. You don't have to do it the way that I did, but it's a special place in the world.
What an epic experience. That's so cool. Let's go with maybe your favorite sport hero.
Ooh, favorite sports hero. The one who jumps to mind is Pele, only because, again, he was sort of this iconic figure during my youth when I was playing soccer. And here was this international person who'd come to the US and he played for the New York Cosmos. And yeah, I mean, just a quick one like that. And then you triggered another one that I've got to give a shout out to. There's Greg LeMond, who was a famous cyclist in the Tour, but he grew up in Reno, Nevada. He grew up where I was raised. And so couldn't help but be a big fan of what he accomplished in the late 80s, early 90s as a tour rider. Those would be 2 that quickly come to mind.
Epic. And final question, maybe one thing that you'd want every kid or child to know about movement, play, sport.
Just take the first step. Just actually, back to what Strava was, just go have some fun. I guarantee, I am 100% certain you'll have fun if you go out there and do not worry about what other kids are doing, what they're doing. Just stay in your little bubble and enjoy what you're doing, and great things will happen. But take that first step, just one step.
On that powerful note of encouragement, Mark, thank you so much for your time. This conversation for me has been particularly special, and I've just enjoyed just trading old stories, wisdom and everything. Thank you for sharing so much about your journey. It's truly remarkable, and you're the role model. You talk about parents being role models, but you're the role model for taking play movement at its infancy as a kid, multi-sport all the way through, and really showing how it impacts across your life and successes and across your life and living life, and continue to move and finding new ways to move and redefining a failure for a lot of people, I think. So there's tremendous lessons, and I thank you for sharing this with everyone.
It's my pleasure, Claire. Anytime. Thanks for the conversation. It was really fun.